to take the floor. You can just start your presentation if you are ready. But before you start your presentation, would you please introduce yourself? I am Muhammet Taş. I'm a veterinary surgeon. I'm from Gaziantep. I'm 24 years old. And let me extend my thanks to distinguished President, Commander Adnan Tanrıverdi, and all the managers in the organizations for their kind efforts. In my presentation, I will be talking about the need and significance of the establishment of a common unit, a joint unit for internal security and public order for the Islamic countries. I'm not going to use any slides. Today, Muslims are seen to be forced to live in a discriminating environment, and Muslims have to face many challenges. But in fact, that also triggered another problem: the lack of the ability to create a security unit, a joint security unit. Imperialist powers and their officials in the Islamic countries adopted the discriminating policy, and from past even until today, the creation of a joint security unit was prevented. And in fact, the Islamic world lost its opportunity to come together and convene under one umbrella. And during the late years of the Ottoman Empire, there were many lies, and the lands, the new territories were usurped by the imperial states. Russia, US, China, and some other imperial states wanted to have a greater field of influence on the Islamic countries, and those attempts are still ongoing. And the Islamic community need to go back to that understanding of unity, and it is essential that they have to create that joint security unit. I have 3 chapters in my presentation. The first chapter was about the public order practices in the Ottoman Empire. As you know, the empire just survived since 1299, and about 1.8 million square meters of land was secured by the Ottoman. And as an example, the security officials consist of the Qadis, the Islamic judges, and Qadis were serving in their jurisdictions, which were called the Qazas. They were responsible for the local administration, the policing of their jurisdiction as well. And they were mostly dealing with the judicial topics. And in other arms, they were mostly supervising and inspecting. And they were the proxy for the Sultan. In their fields of operation, they were totally independent in their operations, and they were just reporting to the Sultan and the cabinet. And Qadis were also the spokespersons in the palace for the people. The Qadis would also investigate certain cases that were filed based on complaints, just like corruption and other topics. And Qadis were always trained people. They were trained in the madrasas, the Islamic universities. And first, they would have an internship period, about 3 to 5 years, and then they would come back to Istanbul, and they would spend some time in order to get profound knowledge, and then they would be appointed to their permanent working places. Their appointment would be handled by the AÇCA in the Ottoman. Let me list the judicial functions of the Qadis. In the Sharia course that they were trading, they were seeing the cases, they were seeing many litigations and cases just like divorces, inheritance, foundation procedures and transactions, other penal actions, manslaughtering, and they would be having the judgments, making the orders. And the hearing rooms were mostly in the mosques. They also acted as notary publics. In the transactions, buying and selling bonds would be issued by them, title deeds would be arranged by them, and the marriage and divorce procedures would also be handled by the Qadis. Qadis also had some main administrative roles. They were responsible for the public order in the city. They were inspecting the guilds of the tradesmen, and they were inspecting the management of the mosques and the schools. They were responsible for the urban development as well. They were responsible for the cleanliness of the town. They were checking the prices of the products and goods that were sold in the markets. They would be responsible for landscaping and the basic items of needs would never go to the black market thanks to the inspections of the Qada, and they would also penalize those who violated the rules. In addition to Qadis, there were bands and their band organization in the Ottoman, and that was most related to the settlement policy of the Ottoman, and they were this guarantee of the security of the travelers on the trade routes. Main trading roads and routes were secured by their bands. Internal settlement issues would be handled by and sorted out by Derbent organization. There are modern examples of Derbent organizations in the USA. In national security strategy is a part of some reports that are published. You know, the US is a federal state, and that can be an analogy. The national security strategy is periodically issued by the executive body of the state, and a practical that report is a document that lists the issues and the ways of how to handle it. And the grants are given in the Nichols Law, National Military Strategy, and there are other papers that support this National Security Strategy report. 2002 National Security Strategy was including the war doctrine of the President Bush that was disputable as well. And it was authored by two authors. And it also included the military supremacy concept of the US military. In 2010, the President Barack Obama adopted a new strategy that was a new divergence, and it defended the increased interaction between China and India, and it also said that new strategy said something about the nuclear weapons. In order to prevent proliferation of nuclear weapons and in order to counteract climate change, some priorities were included in the report, and the economy of the US would be revitalized. In fact, those who prepared the new strategy wanted to eliminate the words Islamic radicalism and terrorism. And then in Afghanistan, in order to defeat Al-Qaeda, US underlined that there is need for increased cooperation between different entities and organizations and institutions. So including countries that are fighting and against and dealing with civil insurgents. different ways had to be found, and development had to be encouraged and promoted. And in 2017, there was another national security strategy in the US. There was the Deputy Security Advisor, Nadia Shadow. So she also worked on the paper, and her works, in fact, were welcomed by the foreign policy experts. And President Trump submitted a new document in 2017. China and Russia were named as revisionist powers. Climate change was no more a threat, according to the US. And just like the other papers, the globe was seen as a competition area rather than a global market. And in the last strategy in 2021, President Biden just identified new global priorities for the US, and some temporary national security strategy was established. The report said that the United States can show that democracies can still serve to our nations. It was necessary to revive democracies. That was the short conclusion of that report. And apart from that, we can also have a look at NATO and summarize what has happened since the past. Right after the Second World War, there was the threat of Soviet Russia, and there was a need for a security structure that would involve the United States, and that was how NATO was founded, and then it evolved through the years. The security understanding of NATO was there, and the strategies changed in time according to the needs. The first one was a strategic concept that was published in 1950. It mostly focused on the deterrence function, and the use of power would be applicable only in case of necessity. And then NATO recognized that they had to strengthen their structure in the face of Korean War, and some centrally commanded military power was needed. And then in 1951, the High Command of NATO was founded. Long-term policies and targets were set in the strategy. International security atmosphere changed then, and the players had changed security needs. And the NATO had to adapt to the changing environment, and the players, typically have to adapt their strategies according to changing needs. This is what NATO did. And generally speaking, NATO mostly is focused on an alliance based on deterrence. And in the new security atmosphere, in order to have presence, NATO and the players have to develop new strategies. And I would like to come to my conclusions and recommendations for this formation. The Islamic States could establish their joint unit, and that is going to align the policies. And among the Islamic States, it will be possible to have the union, and the Islamic States will be able to go back to and restore their values and revive their values. And the Islamic States will be able to share technologies and know-how, and the states can achieve this. They can have a wider field of operation. Terrorism and other items are there that are being manipulated in order to trigger more discrimination among the Islamic nations, and all these attempts can be deterred with a union. And in the ancient Islamic history, you can see many examples of this practice. In the near future, you can find examples from the Ottoman state. Just a century before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, in fact, the foreign powers were not able to usurp the resources of the Ottoman Empire. However, they were able to attain their imperialist goals, and they were able to create new threats. And then that was the way to usurp the resources of the empire. This is why I said that a common public order and security unit is needed among the Islamic states, and they need this union. Yesterday, I remember what Professor Necmettin Keleş said based on Anfa Surah. God instructs that the people should surrender to the Prophet and God, and the believers must be patient because God will be standing by who have patience.